What's up everybody, the Poets here. Hope you're doing well and staying safe. And today's video is about the beginnings of water cooling. There's a lot to water cooling, as you can see right here. This is the test bed system that I made called Destro, and I did a whole playlist on how to build a PC. This is the quote-unquote finished work of it. Test beds are never finished because I'm going to be replacing the GPU, the CPU, and different things in it. It just makes it easy to do that. And it's because it's this open concept. We also have a lot of different fittings here. So really today's video is primarily about choosing the right fittings for your tastes and preferences, but also for your needs, and so you don't destroy your system as well. So there are a lot of different styles of fittings. There's one, you have soft tubing, right? And then you have hard tubing. And there's different types of soft tubing and different types of hard tubing, different sizes for all of that as well. So with custom water cooling, you always want to make sure you're taking your time, doing your research, planning out the entire build from start to finish, because it could be when you're at the basically tail end of a custom water cooling planning session, you'll find out some key component is just not compatible with everything else, and therefore you may have saved yourself a lot of time, headache, and destroyed parts. So for example, these two radiators right here, they're by different manufacturers. This is by EKWB, EK Water Blocks, and this is their Cool Stream SE, so it's a nice like kind of slim edition SE. This is by Thermaltake, and this is a 360 millimeter radiator. This is a 240 millimeter, so you can see the size differences. The EK looks like it's a little bit thicker than this one, but kind of irrelevant. But these are both made of the same material, which in this case is copper, and that's perfectly fine. You can have copper on copper, you can have nickel plated copper, anything in the descriptions of your materials for your build that says copper or nickel plated copper, perfectly fine. It's when you mix other metals in, that's where you need to start doing your research, AKA aluminum or aluminium, depending on where you're from. This radiator right here is also by Thermaltake, and so is this one. So even though they're the same manufacturer, they're actually different metals. So this aluminum radiator would actually dissolve if we put even this smaller copper radiator in the same loop, because of basically electrochemical science, right? When you have the fluid going from one radiator to the other, all the fluid is kind of together in this loop. Copper destroys aluminum. It'll literally turn to mush, and your whole custom water cooling build will just gunk up, and you'll have to take everything apart, clean the blocks, all that stuff. You don't want to go through all of that. Plus, with all that gunk build up, your parts like your CPU or your GPU could actually start to overheat as well. So you don't want that either. So plan out your loop. First step is make sure you're not mixing metals. Copper, aluminum, two different sides. You can have an entire build of just aluminum, perfectly fine. In fact, EK Fluid Works, they're actually a division of EKWB. They're located here in Burbank, in Southern California. I've viewed their facilities, and some of their very high-end, expensive builds, like $50,000 builds, they're actually mostly aluminum, if not all aluminum, because aluminum actually does a wonderful job of dissipating heat. So when you have these very expensive systems with like 7 GPUs, you want to get that heat away as quickly as possible. So that's where aluminum actually does a really good job. Now copper does a great job of absorbing heat. So having copper on, say, a CPU or a GPU is wonderful, because that's going to take the heat away from those hot components faster than aluminum, but it takes a little bit longer for copper to then dissipate that heat. But overall, for custom water cooling, in this day and age, it's kind of taste and preference. I personally like copper a little bit more for builds like this, and when it comes to aluminum, it's cheaper, you know, so that's kind of nice. And EK Fluid Gaming, for most of their PCs, they're actually all aluminum as well. So, and those temperatures are fabulous. I've actually been testing the EK Fluid Gaming Vanquish 295 with a 5950X and RTX 3090, all aluminum loop, and the temperatures are wonderful. So it does have 2 radiators, and you know, I definitely like the system, and it's very quiet as well. Now, tubing, that's something that you do have to definitely plan out, because you have some options. This right here is PETG or PETG, depending on who you're talking to. It's interesting tubing because it's easy to use. Let me just kind of open this up. And what I mean by easy to use is you can actually cut this very easily with the right tools. Let's see if I actually have a tool around here. I do. Hey, look at that. So something like this. This is my XSPC. So it's basically a round edge right here. You can put the tube in this like that, and then cut, right? And then at that point, you can kind of do whatever you want with it. Also, when it comes to bending this, it doesn't take a lot of heat. You still need a heat gun, so you set up on your table. I'll do a whole video on bending, don't worry about that. But it doesn't take long for this to get soft enough for you to bend it to like a 90-degree angle, something nice and easy, right? Also, when it comes to sanding down the edges, it's very quick with this as well. There's a reason why you want to do that, because when you're finally putting something like this in a fitting, a hardline tube fitting, and this one is soft tubing, so we're going to get into that. You don't want the sharp edges here to cut your O-rings, because there's little rubber kind of inserts inside of these that are holding all of this fluid back, right? So it's not just like metal on PETG plastic type of thing. Now, this one right here is hardline tubing as well. This is actually acrylic. Acrylic is much harder than PETG. So you can see with this, I can easily bend that, but for acrylic, not so much. You can bend it, but not so much. And you cannot use something like this on acrylic. If I did that, it would shatter like glass, and we don't want that. You actually, best practice is to use like a saw to kind of just go ahead and saw it, very fine tooth saw. I like to put it in a vise, and for me, that's always been the best thing to do. And then at the same time, you do want to sand down the edges as well. And there's different techniques for that. I'll get into that later. But then it's the same thing. When you're putting in the hardline tube fitting, you just want to make sure that these are rounded enough on the edges so that you're not cutting the little rubber O-rings in here. Because again, you don't want leaks. Acrylic, with it being so hard, and it definitely looks better than PETG without a doubt. Every time I've done a side-by-side test for people on TikTok and Twitter and all that stuff, they always 100% pick this acrylic. But it is harder to use because you do have to saw it. And when it comes to bending, you need to have this basically sit over the heat for a very long time compared to PETG. PETG will bend very quickly. This, you need a much higher temperature. But for me, it's worth it. Almost all of my builds now, I use acrylic. I don't really like to use glass because it's glass. There's a downside to the glass, but glass looks basically like this. This is much easier to use, and yeah, it's just safer. Put it that way. Then, when it comes to everything that you see here, let's start with soft tubing. So this is the same tubing that you see right here. It's called ZMT. Zero maintenance tubing. This is by EKWB. There's other companies that do make similar tubing as well, but I'm so used to using this that this is what I use. There's different sizes. So you're going to see here that there is an inner and outer diameter that we always go by, and actually on this box, it'll have kind of 3 different sizes as well, because you can order it in 3 different sizes. Taste and preferences, honestly, for your size that you want to use. But you have to match up the size of your tubing with the size of your fitting, obviously. So let's go through that, because I have 2 different size fittings right here for soft tubing. This is 16 outer diameter, 10 inner diameter, and you have to choose that same exact sizing for your soft tubing fitting. Now, this is basically the same thing. I still also like 16 outer diameter for hardline tubing as well. And so most of my fittings right here are going to be 16 millimeter outer diameter. You don't really need to be concerned too much with the inner diameter for hardline tubing, because all of the fittings are going to be based on how wide it is for it to comfortably fit that hardline tubing. And there's different ways that the hardline tubing fittings actually work as well. So let's go ahead and get into this, and I'll show you each individual fitting. These fittings are some of my favorite and some of the most popular ones as well. Now, the way these fittings work is they have this clamp here. So you just unscrew this and hold on to that, and you'll screw this right in to the radiator, like that. Now, hand tightening can be okay, but you can use some of these tools, depending on the manufacturer, to just go ahead and give it an extra little turn, just to make sure it's nice and taut. And we're gonna do the same thing for this one. And you'll notice these sizes are different. So we're just gonna go ahead and screw this in here as well. And so I'm gonna have to use a different key for this one, just to make sure. There we go. So now, with this tubing right here, 16 outer diameter, 10 inner diameter, if I try to put this on this one, I'm not really going to be too successful. It's not the right size. But on this one, it actually is. So this actually works, boom, just like that. And then I can go ahead and slide this on, just like this, and then screw it down. And you'll press down as you're screwing it down as well. So that's pretty much it for softline tubing. And it's a very easy thing to put on and take off. When it comes to taking it off, what I try to do is just kind of bend the tube like this. Boom, just like that, nice and easy. This fitting right here is a hardline tube fitting. This is the Thermaltake Pacific C Pro, and you'll notice it's very different. So one of the first things you do is actually screw this part right on here. And I love this fitting because it has this nifty little key, if I can pick it up, like this. And it fits in this slot, and you just turn it and make it nice and tight. Simple as that. Now, when you are actually putting your tubing down, this is wonderful because you can actually measure precisely for where it's going to fit. So this is golden. This is one of my favorite fittings out of pretty much all the fittings I've ever tried. And so then you can measure and cut exactly where you need to, and there's no guesstimation because this is exactly where this tube is going to stop when it's in the fitting. And so this part, you actually do need to be careful because there's going to be a nifty little O-ring right here. So there's a little groove right here. And this actually has 3 O-rings. So you have like triple redundancy right here. So there's 1, 2, and then this is the 3rd. And so you're actually going to go ahead. Now I'm going to be very careful with this because I didn't sand down the sides, so I don't want to damage these O-rings. But this will then go in just like that. There we go. So that'll come down. Nice. And then this, if you want, you can bring it all the way down. Just be careful not to scratch your tubing. So there's obviously different ways. You could have just gone the short way as well. So then just make sure that this is all flush, just like that. And then you're just going to screw that down. So nice and easy. Boom, done. And that's not going anywhere. Love it. So then, same thing, just unscrew it, take it off, and you can actually pull this to take it out as well. So the Thermaltake Pacific C Pros, some of my favorite. And then when you're done, make sure you always keep everything together and make sure your O-rings are all in there as well. This one is by EKWB. It is a hardline tube fitting, and it's different from the Thermaltake one where it does have the O-ring right there. You see the O-ring kind of fell out. So you want to make sure you always keep track of those O-rings. And then this one only has one other one. So this has 2 O-rings where the Thermaltake had 3. And it doesn't mean that Thermaltake is better. It's just a different style. Because of how they're doing this clamp, they feel that they only need 2, which is perfectly fine. And so now that that's in there, you would actually, best practice is to kind of moisten this with like distilled water and then go ahead and turn and get this to slide all the way down, right? I'm not going to do that because I haven't chamfered or, sanded down the edges here. So with the EKWB fitting right here, you do want to then have your O-ring on the tube and the clamp behind it. And that's a great example of how you lose O-rings. It just vanished. Be right back after these messages. Okay, we're back. It was underneath my sock somehow. So we have the O-ring in here, and we're just going to go ahead and place this on like that. So you have the O-ring, you have the clamp, and then you would actually place this in there. Make sure it goes all the way down. And once it's all the way down, you'll actually feel it kind of snap down. Then you just screw this on, and there you go, all done. And then unscrew it when you're all done with your loop, and just make sure you keep this O-ring, and then keep that obviously as well. So then you can just kind of put this back, unscrew that, or if you need to, you can use something like this just to make sure that these are screwed in properly. Right? So, oh, wrong one, wrong size. There we go. That's the correct size. So, it's good to have a number of these around, as you can see, because there are different sizes. And so, just make sure the O-ring is in there. Place that down, screw it lightly, and you're good to go. Now this one is a bit different. This one is by Optimus. And Optimus, they're kind of a smaller company compared to EKWB and Thermaltake. And this fitting is a hardline tube fitting. It is a smaller diameter as well. So I believe this is 14 millimeter outer diameter off the top of my head. And actually, here's the box for it. Does it say it? Nope, it doesn't say it. But this is Optimus right here. And it's basically the same thing. This is more of a gasket style of fitting, they call this, where then you would fit your more narrow tube right in there, along with this being already on the tubing. So I just don't have any of these smaller tubings on hand because I do prefer the wider, the thicker tubing as well. But these look quite nice. They're kind of stylish. And so you just kind of screw it down as well, and boom, you'd be done. Now we have the 2 different tubings right here. This is obviously the PETG, and this is obviously the acrylic. At least I can see, hopefully you guys can tell on camera. But what we're going to be doing is just kind of showing you my best practice for cutting acrylic. I like to use a piece of cardboard to kind of wrap the tubing so that I don't crack it or scratch it or anything like that. And so it's in the vise right there. And then I'll just take my saw, just like this, and very carefully start sawing away for exactly where I want to cut. So I would have marked where I want to cut with like a permanent black marker, just like a little tiny dot. That's about it. Now, when it comes to rounding down these edges, you can do it by hand, but I like to cheat. I like to use this little tool right here. This is by Primo Chill. I always forget that it's by Primo Chill. It's their RFB, deburr, tube, trimmer, reamer. Yeah, so this is specifically for 12 millimeter inner diameter, 16 millimeter outer diameter, and basically you just attach this to a drill. And let's see here, if I can do this one-handed, nice and easily, just like that. And then you just put it right in there and let it go. I might as well do it. There you go. And now this is nice and round so that it won't cut any of the O-rings inside of any of the fittings. And you can even use this to adjust your kind of length, if you want to say, for this tubing as well. So if you just have cut this a little too long, but you don't want to cut again, just use this to kind of sand it down a little bit further. It does get very messy though, so have a garbage can next to you. And so that is about it. That's some of the basics for custom water cooling. So choose your correct metals, aluminum or copper. Choose whether you want to go soft tubing or hardline tubing. For soft tubing, it's something like this, ZMT, zero maintenance tubing. So light doesn't penetrate it. The fluid takes a very long time to evaporate through this. If you use clear tubing, those can look nice as well, personal preference, but they do fade over time and they do absorb the colors of whatever fluid you want to use as well. So even if you use clear fluid like this, yeah, the tubing will fade. So it will turn like yellow or something like that over time, because that's what light does to clear tubing. So I love zero maintenance tubing. And then for obviously hardline tubing, PETG, like that, or acrylic, much tougher, looks nicer. PETG is actually easier to use though, because it requires less heat, like I said before. And you can just cut it with something like this. Very nice. This is by XSPC. All right, there you go. So other than that, if you guys have any questions at all, just put them down in the comments below. Fairly straightforward video, but a lot of people are scared of custom water cooling because of the learning curve. So I hope that this helps out a little bit. Just choose your right fittings, and once you get your understanding of sizing and type of fitting, at that point it's just build based on your own personal style. It's custom. So if you like this video, hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and hit the like button, helps the algorithm out. It's late, I'm tired. And feel free to share this video with others that are into learning about PC building in general. So with that being said, I'm the Poets, and I'm going to bed. Good night. Peace.